3.5 years ago, I published a episode here of the Sales History Podcast, and it was called Using History to Predict the Future of the Sales Profession. Well, here we are, and it continues to play out exactly as predicted through the lens of the 1920s. Recently, I found on eBay a edition of Specialty Salesman magazine. It was the March of 21 edition. There's an article by Edgar J. Mills in it, and it's called The Tendency Towards Better Salesmen, but it walks through precisely what happened in the 1910s and 1920s. And again, it speaks to exactly what is happening now. And again, we can continue to predict what is going to happen over the next few years through its lens. So with today's episode, I'm going to actually walk you through some of the profound things that Edgar J. Mills said in this 1921 article. We're going to tie it back to what's happening today, and then do a little prognostication about what is to come. So here we go, an episode on predicting the future of the sales profession through the lens of history.
There is nothing new in the world of sales except for the history you do not know. Welcome to the Sales History Podcast, bringing the brilliant and sometimes strange minds, methods, and ideas from the sales profession's past with applications to today. Here is your host, the best-selling author of 2 books, with a 3rd coming in January of 2026. CSP speaker, trainer, and nerd, Todd Caponi.
As a sales profession, we are reliving the 1920s right now. And we have relived the 1920s before, and we will again. As it turns out, for an extended period during the first part of the 20th century, before World War I, the sales profession was building its reputation from the ground up. Companies had shifted during the progressive era of the Industrial Revolution from using independent salespeople, so bagmen and drummers, and you've heard of all of that before, to hiring, training, and developing their own salespeople. And it was really because they had to. This organization-specific sales approach was founded on trust, a focus on customer outcomes, and a mantra that the sales profession was a service profession. When the United States entered World War I, it set a pendulum swinging. The economy shut off, and when it turned back on after the war, selling became easy. Salespeople forgot about their focus on effort. They forgot about self-development, or really development at all for that matter. Then the pendulum swung the other way. At the time of the article's writing, this 1921 article, the economy was just realizing that, hey, we're in the midst of a little-known depression, which later has been titled the Forgotten Depression of the early 1920s. Mills wrote of the need to get back to pre-war thinking in terms of effort, development, trust, and service. Unfortunately, what happened next set the profession back to a level we still struggle with today. Manufacturers kept manufacturing, which led to a rise in inventories well beyond demand. This was the first time this happened during that progressive era of manufacturing growth. It meant many bad actors began to prioritize high-pressure selling. This meant essentially aggressive selling techniques, and in many cases, hiding or stretching the truth. Every time our economy has experienced a pendulum effect, beginning with a shutdown, we've experienced this type of environment. This happened when COVID hit in March of 2020. The economy shut off, and it followed a pendulum again. I'm going to read for you a few of the paragraphs from the article. What you're going to find is the writing is fantastic, the advice is spot on, and the story of what happened is both clear and familiar. Then afterwards, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown of what's happened here in the 2020s and then potentially what's to come. So, buckle up. Here is some of the select paragraphs from Edgar J. Mills' article called The Tendency Towards Better Salesmen, from the March of 1921 edition of Specialty Salesman magazine. In the days before the war, business had run along in the same groove for so many years that we had all oriented ourselves almost automatically. We had grown up with these conditions, and it was becoming popular to become a better salesman, to tell the exact truth about all goods, and to consider the customer and his interests, and to deliver value and service. We thought we had traveled a long way when we reached the point, and we really had. Then came the war, and we found out that we had to orient ourselves all over. But it was delightfully easy, for we were in the buyer's market. People had the money and were ready to spend it, and we could sell all the goods and service we could get hold of or have time to present. The tendency was to make the specialty salesman take things a bit easy. He could coin money with relatively little effort, and there were so many chances for him to spend his own coin that he reasoned he might as well do as the Romans did while he was in Rome. But let us not forget that we have reached an entirely different stage in the game. Conditions have changed. We have now come in the process of after-war readjustment to the seller's market, and we can no longer take it easy and expect to make a good showing. This is where we have got to find our bearings and reorient ourselves all over. During the war, the only cheap thing was money. Now the money market is getting very strong and firm, and business houses are running their expenses in every direction and are demanding results of employees. And in many cases, business depression has necessitated large numbers of good men being laid off. And naturally, the process of selection has gone through very carefully and the best ones retained. During the war, many workers felt that they were so valuable and their places so difficult to fill that they could be rather indifferent to their work. Now workers are taking a more serious view of their jobs, knowing that their places can be easily filled and that they in turn will have difficulty placing themselves satisfactorily. Difficulty is a real challenge which brings out the best that is in a man. Today as never before, there are opportunities for training, for study, for observation, and for reorienting ourselves if we will but make the best of them. There is an abundance of high-class magazine literature which is of the most constructive and inspiring type. There are wide-awake men with whom to associate. If a man cannot get someone else to educate him, he can educate himself. He can keep himself well-groomed and be thoroughly self-respecting. If he goes after a chance to do business, he can either land that through impressing someone else as to his ability and earnestness and sincerity, or he can go into business on his own account. The individual requisites for success may briefly be listed as, number one, personal development and salesmanship, and character, and general acquaintance with business conditions. Number two, a special knowledge of the goods or service that you offer, with the ability to present these to the individual prospect in the most compelling manner. There are those who will always bemoan and bewail new tendencies or marked changes in the business stream or current, but those of us who are wiser welcome such changes. We know that while a certain period of stress may prevail, in the end, there will be a splendid weeding out of those plants which sap the soil and yield no harvest. We know that this weeding out process will give the true and the worthy a chance to grow healthy and strong, and to do that amount of business to which they are entitled. So let us not regret this new tendency of modern business. Let us get ready to be leaders in the field. Years of prosperity stretch ahead. Oh yes, it is necessary that we become imbued with the dignity and importance of our work, and that we equip ourselves to do our work so well that the modern tendency will prove a blessing to one and all. Okay, so thinking about what I just read to you, he talked about a couple of things. First of all, let's start by looking at what Mills talked about in terms of that first couple of sentences. He said that in the days before the war, business had run along in the same groove for so many years that we had all oriented ourselves almost automatically. He went on to talk about the fact that it was becoming popular to be a better salesman, to tell the exact truth about all goods, and to consider the customer and his interests, and to deliver value and service. He's talking about this period, really, that was from 1914 to 1918. That was very similar to the period of 2016 to 2020 that we had experienced today. Our economy was in a consistent growth environment. Inflation was level and everything was good. And salespeople were really, it took effort. It wasn't easy. It wasn't hard, super hard either. We were just smart about the way that we were developing ourselves. And then what happened? Well, he talks about 1918, World War I hit, and it shut down the economy for a little bit. That's exactly what happened to us in 2020, right? The economy shut down for a short period due to COVID, and in both cases, it set this pendulum in motion. In 1919, when the economy turned back on, it grew so quickly that a great resignation environment was created. There were more available sales jobs than competent salespeople to fill them, so everyone was just chasing money in the sales profession. Sales was easy, and he talked about it here. Gibbs said, quote, he could coin money with relatively little effort. That was exactly what was going on then. And if you look at late 2020 to 2021, the same thing was happening. There was rampant voluntary turnover, and the number of new unicorns in 2021, which was 587, was higher than the previous 4 years combined. But what happened? By the end of 1919, inflation started to spike. So he's talking about the money market. In the spring of 2022, for us, inflation spiked as well, didn't it? All right, so let's go back to late 1920. That's when the bottom dropped out. When I talked about the period known as the Forgotten Depression of the early 1920s. Involuntary turnover among salespeople in 1922 was reported to be as high as 85%. And if you think back to late 2022, things got hairy for us, didn't it? Salesperson involuntary turnover spiked in late 2022 throughout 2023. Coming out of the rough period in both 1923 and in 2024, a declaration was made. Revenue at all costs is dead. But within 2 years, revenue at all costs was back. Back then, we're starting to see it now, especially with the AI bubble that's being created. I don't want this to sound like shameless self-backpatting. I've been beating this drum since I first wrote about this in February of 2022. You keep hearing, but this time is different. A lot of that was in the comments and direct messages. It hasn't been. The revenue at all costs model is coming back. It seems to be happening. And when I look at what happened through the 1920s, you had a year or two of good, a year or two of rough, a year or two of good, a year or two of rough. We're seeing that right now. My advice for everybody is, first of all, buckle up. We're going to be on a roller coaster for a little bit, and let's hope that it doesn't end the way that the 1920s ended, with the beginning of the Great Depression, of course. But number two is going back to this idea of making it popular to focus on becoming a better salesperson, to always tell the exact truth about everything that you're selling, to focus on the customer and their interests, to help deliver optimal outcomes or outcomes that your customers never even thought possible, and to deliver on that value and focus on being a service profession. Remember what Arthur Selden said in his 1911 book, The Art of Selling. His quote, "True salesmanship is the science of service." Grasp that thought firmly and never let go. We continue to let go. Let's go back to that. I think there's an opportunity there, especially when we can see the future, we know what's coming, and it consistently is matching what happened throughout the 1920s. As always, to hear your feedback once again on this, I think it's pretty amazing. Again, I'm no Nostradamus here. All I'm trying to track is the similarities between an economy that looks so much like today's and using that to predict. I've been doing it for 3 years here, and we're still completely on that same track. Why would it be any different coming up in the next 3 years? So please reach out if you've got questions, if you've got ideas. If you've given this a listen somewhere, give it a little star rating. And as always, I so appreciate you listening in. So until next time, thanks again.